Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created with the assistance of AI tools for educational and entertainment purposes. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, locales, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The most powerful crime boss in Seoul had survived 17 assassination attempts, crushed 4 rival organizations beneath his heel, and built an empire worth more than some small countries. But nothing in his 42 years of brutal existence had prepared him for the 14-month-old child who would grip his trouser leg and reveal a secret that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his own life. If you're new to this channel, hit the subscribe button right now. Like the video and comment where you're watching from. Thank you. Let's continue. Kang Min-jae sat at the head of his private conference table, surrounded by 6 of his most trusted lieutenants, discussing the expansion of their pharmaceutical front into the lucrative Chinese market. The room was an impenetrable fortress, bulletproof glass that could withstand military-grade weapons, walls so soundproof that screams had died inside them unheard, biometric locks that recognized only 12 people on the entire planet. No one entered this room without permission. No one. Not the police. Not rival gangs. Not even the men who had tried to kill him over the years. The discussion was reaching its critical point. Millions of dollars hanging on every word when the sound came. Not an explosion. Not gunfire. Not any of the threats Min-jae had spent decades training himself to anticipate. Just a soft shuffle. Tiny feet on marble floor. The door that required fingerprint scanning, retinal identification, and a 17-digit code that changed every 6 hours, creaked slowly inward. Every man at the table reached for his weapon. Min-jae raised a single hand. The movement froze. Through the gap in the door, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent light of the hallway beyond, appeared something that made absolutely no sense in the context of this room full of killers. A baby, barely walking, maybe 14 months old, wearing a faded yellow onesie that had been washed so many times the color had turned pale. Tiny socks with cartoon bears. Dark hair, messy and uncombed. Round cheeks flushed pink with the effort of the journey from wherever this impossible creature had originated. The child stood in the doorway for a moment, surveying the room full of armed men with the casual disinterest of someone who had no concept of danger, no understanding of death, no recognition that every person staring at her had killed before and would kill again. Then she began to walk, not toward the door, not away from the strangers, directly toward Kang Min-jae. Stop right there. I need you to do something before we continue. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens in the next 60 seconds is going to change this man's entire life. And it's going to change how you see this story. This child is about to do something that will haunt Min-jae forever. Something that will expose a secret buried for over a year. Something that will make the most dangerous man in Seoul question everything he believes about himself. Subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on notifications. And drop a comment telling me what you think this baby is about to do. Because I promise you, whatever you're imagining isn't even close to the truth. Do it now. Then keep watching. Park Sung-ho, Min-jae's second-in-command for 15 years, moved to intercept the child, his hand reaching toward the small figure with an intent that could have been protective or could have been something else entirely. Again, Min-jae's hand rose. Don't. The word came out before he could analyze why he'd said it. Before he could understand the strange paralysis that had gripped his chest the moment those small feet had appeared in his doorway. Before he could process the wrongness of his own reaction. The baby continued her unsteady journey across the conference room. Past legs that had kicked men to death. Past hands that had signed execution orders without trembling. Past eyes that had watched the light fade from countless faces without flinching. Straight to Min-jae, and then with the casual entitlement of someone who had never been denied anything in her short life. The child reached up and grabbed Min-jae's trouser leg. Not for comfort, for balance. The small fingers curled into the expensive fabric of his custom-tailored suit, a suit that cost more than most Koreans made in a year, and gripped with surprising strength. The child looked up at Min Jae with dark eyes that held no fear, no recognition of threat, no understanding of who or what she was touching. Just curiosity, just a question that had no words yet. Min Jae couldn't move. 17 assassination attempts. 4 rival organizations destroyed. Billions of won flowing through accounts that existed in the shadows between nations. He had faced death more times than he could count. He had delivered death more times than he cared to remember. And he was frozen by a child who weighed less than the weapon holstered under his jacket. But it wasn't the child's presence that paralyzed him. It was her eyes, dark as obsidian, steady as stone, holding his gaze with an intensity that felt completely wrong in someone so young. Not the scattered attention of a toddler distracted by everything, something more focused, more knowing, like a mirror reflecting something back at him that he didn't want to see. The weight of that small hand on his leg felt familiar. Not in a way he could explain. Not in a way he wanted to examine. Just familiar. Like muscle memory. Like an echo of something that had happened before, but couldn't have happened before, because this child was a stranger, a random intrusion, an impossible anomaly in his carefully controlled world. Sorry. The scream came from the hallway. High. Panicked. The sound of a mother who had turned around and found her child missing. Footsteps followed, rapid and desperate. And then a woman burst through the door that should have been completely impossible to open from the outside. She was young, maybe late 20s, wearing the plain gray uniform of the building's cleaning staff. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, already escaping in wisps from the exertion of her search. Her face was a mask of pure terror as she took in the scene before her. 6 armed men with hands on weapons. The most dangerous crime boss in Seoul. And her baby clinging to his leg like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. She got away from me. I was cleaning the hallway and I turned around for 1 second and she... Please, I'm sorry. I'll take her. Please don't. The woman's words tumbled over each other, fractured by fear. She was already moving toward the child, already reaching out to retrieve the source of her terror, already calculating how bad the consequences were going to be. Min Jae should have let her take the child. He should have dismissed the entire incident as a security failure to be addressed later. He should have ordered his men to deal with the breach while he returned to the business at hand. Instead, he looked at the mother's face, and his blood turned to ice. He knew her, not from a file, not from a photograph, not from any of the thousands of faces that passed through his operations. He knew her from a hotel bar in Busan, 14 months ago, where a woman with those exact features had laughed at his jokes and touched his hand and made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. A woman he had been told was dead. Everyone out. His lieutenants stared at him like he had lost his mind. Sir, Sung-ho began, his voice carrying an edge of something that Min Jae would later recognize as alarm. I said out. All of you. Now. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Min Jae's orders were absolute. They had always been absolute, but this was unprecedented. This was bizarre. This was the kind of behavior that made men question their leader's judgment. Then, one by one, they rose and filed toward the door. Sung-ho was the last to leave, his expression a mixture of concern and something darker that Min Jae filed away for later examination. Something that looked almost like fear, but not fear of the situation. Fear of being discovered. The door closed behind them. Min Jae was alone with the mother, the child still gripping his trouser leg, and a suspicion that was rapidly crystallizing into something far more dangerous. What is your name? The woman's terror had not diminished. If anything, being alone with him seemed to make it worse. She stood frozen in place, her hands still outstretched toward her daughter, her entire body trembling visibly. Yoon Yeon.
The words came out barely above a whisper. The name hit Min Jae like a bullet to the chest. It was her. The same name she had given him in that hotel bar. The same name he had whispered in the darkness of his hotel room. The same name he had mourned, briefly, yes, but genuinely, when he was told she had died in an accident. And the child? Sori. Her name is Sori. Ji-Yun's voice cracked. She's 14 months old. Please, sir, I'm so sorry. I know I'm not supposed to bring her to work, but the daycare closed, and I couldn't find anyone, and I can't afford to miss a shift, and I'll resign immediately, and 14 months. Min Jae's voice cut through her desperate monologue like a knife. 14 months old, which meant conception roughly 23 months ago, which meant February of the previous year, which was exactly when he had been in Busan, which was exactly when he had spent 3 nights with a woman named Yoon Ji-Yun, which was exactly when his entire life had changed without him knowing it. He looked down at the child still attached to his leg. Sori looked back up at him with those dark, steady eyes. His mother's cheekbones, his father's stubborn jaw, everything he should have recognized immediately if he hadn't been so convinced she couldn't possibly exist. If you're feeling what I'm feeling right now, that twist in your gut, that shock of recognition, then you need to like this video immediately. Not for me, for the story, for the algorithm that will show this to more people who need to experience what you're experiencing. Like it now, and drop a comment. What do you think happened? Why was Min Jae told this woman was dead? Who lied to him and why? I want to hear your theories. Comment right now, then keep watching, because the truth is darker than anything you're imagining. The next 3 hours redefined everything Min Jae thought he understood about control. He sat in his private study, a room even more secure than the conference room, accessible only to him, and made the phone call that would unravel 15 years of trust. Lee Tae-hyun, his head of intelligence, answered on the second ring. I need a complete background check. Every detail you can find. Every record. Every document. Every photograph. On whom, sir? Yoon Yeon. She works as a cleaner in this building. And her daughter, Sori. He paused, weighing whether to say the next words. I believe the child may be mine. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Tae-hyun was a professional, the kind of man who had gathered intelligence on presidents and crime lords without flinching, but even he seemed thrown by this revelation. Time frame. Immediately. Whatever you can find tonight. Full report by morning. Understood, sir. The line went dead. Min Jae spent the next hours pacing his study, examining every memory he had of that week in Busan. The negotiations with the regional syndicate. The hotel with the rooftop bar. The woman who had sat alone, drinking something amber-colored, radiating the kind of sadness that he recognized in himself. They had talked until the bar closed. About nothing important. About everything that mattered. She was a teacher, she had said. Elementary school. She loved her students, but hated the bureaucracy. She was considering a change, but didn't know to what. He had lied about his own profession, of course. Something vague about import-export, the standard cover story he used with civilians. She had accepted it without question, more interested in who he was and what he did. 3 nights. 3 nights of something that felt dangerously close to genuine connection. And then he had left, giving her his personal phone number, the one reserved for matters that had nothing to do with business, the one that signified something he rarely signified to anyone. Interest. Real interest. He had returned to Seoul, expecting to hear from her, planning to find reasons to visit Busan again, imagining, in unguarded moments, what it might be like to have something in his life that wasn't soaked in blood. And then the call had come. A voice he didn't recognize. Sympathetic, regretful, delivering news that no one wanted to deliver. She had been in an accident. Car crash on a mountain road. No survivors. Nothing left to bury. He had mourned. He had moved on. He had never questioned the story. But now, with the evidence of that dead woman standing in his building, with the evidence of their 3 nights together currently being cared for in a private waiting room by confused but obedient guards, the story crumbled into dust. Someone had lied to him. Someone had made Ji-yun disappear from his life. Someone had stolen his daughter from him before he even knew she existed. And Min-jae was going to find out who. The report arrived at 5:47 a.m. Taehyun had worked through the night, calling in favors and resources that would have made government intelligence agencies jealous. The file he delivered was comprehensive: birth certificates, hospital records, employment history, phone logs, financial transactions. And buried in that mountain of data, the truth. The phone call informing Min-jae of Ji-yun's death had originated from a number registered to a shell company. A shell company that, when traced through 17 layers of corporate obfuscation, belonged to someone inside Min-jae's own organization. Someone who had access to Min-jae's personal phone number. Someone who knew about the trip to Busan. Someone who had been with him that entire week, handling logistics and security. Park Sung-ho, his second-in-command, his most trusted lieutenant, his blood brother for 15 years. Min-jae read the evidence 3 times, searching for some alternative explanation, some mistake, some reason why his closest ally would have done something so incomprehensibly cruel. The answer became clear when he examined the timeline more carefully. In the months before the Busan trip, Min-jae had been discussing succession with his inner council. Who would take over if something happened to him? Who would inherit the empire he had built? The conversations had been theoretical. He was only 41 at the time, in perfect health, with no immediate threats on his horizon. But Sung-ho had paid close attention. Sung-ho, who had no family of his own. Sung-ho, who had positioned himself as the natural heir to everything Min-jae controlled. Sung-ho, who would lose that position immediately if Min-jae ever had a legitimate child. The picture became horrifyingly clear. Sung-ho hadn't just prevented Min-jae from having an heir. He had actively sabotaged every possibility. The report included additional details. Other women Min-jae had shown interest in over the years, all of whom had mysteriously moved away or lost interest or simply vanished from his life. Small manipulations that, viewed in isolation, seemed like coincidence or bad luck. Viewed together, they formed a pattern of systematic interference. Sung-ho had been controlling Min-jae's personal life for over a decade, ensuring he stayed alone, ensuring he stayed childless, ensuring that when Min-jae eventually died, everything would flow to the man who had positioned himself as the obvious successor. The rage that built in Min-jae's chest was unlike anything he had experienced before. He had killed men for lesser betrayals. He had destroyed entire organizations for smaller insults. But this was different. This was personal in a way that violence couldn't adequately address. This was the theft of something that could never be. Recovered, 14 months of his daughter's life erased. 14 months of potential with a woman he had genuinely cared for, destroyed. 14 months of lies told by someone he had trusted absolutely. Min-jae picked up his phone. Taehoon, I need you to dig deeper. Everything on Park Sung-ho for the past 15 years. Every communication, every transaction, every connection he's tried to hide. Sir, if I may ask, what are we looking for? Evidence of betrayal. I believe we'll find plenty. Part 2. The Revelation. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in patient investigation. On the surface, nothing changed. Min-jae attended his usual meetings, made his usual decisions, treated Sung-ho with the same trust and confidence he always had. But beneath the surface, an entire operation was in motion. Taehyun's team infiltrated Sung-ho's personal communications. They traced his financial holdings through a maze of shell companies. They interviewed former associates carefully without revealing what they were searching for. What they found was devastating. Sung-ho had been planning a coup for over 5 years. He had cultivated relationships with rival organizations, including the Chun Syndicate, who would pay handsomely for information about Min-jae's operations. He had been siphoning money from joint accounts into personal holdings. He had been building a power base independent of Min Jae's authority, preparing for the day when he would take everything for himself. The lie about Ji-yeon was just one piece of a much larger betrayal. But for Min Jae, it was the piece that mattered most. While his intelligence team gathered evidence, Min Jae began his own investigation of a different sort. He visited Ji-yeon and Sori in a secure apartment where he had placed them for their protection. The first visit was awkward. Ji-yeon, still terrified, still uncertain whether this powerful man was going to help her or destroy her. But Min Jae wasn't there to intimidate. He was there to understand. "Tell me what happened," he said, sitting across from her in the small living room while Sori played on the floor between them. "After I left Busan, tell me everything." Ji-yeon's story emerged slowly, painfully. 2 weeks after Min Jae's departure, a man had come see her. Well-dressed, polite, claiming to be a friend of the man she had met at the hotel. He had told her that Min Jae was married, that he had children, that he made a habit of seducing women during business trips and discarding them afterward. He had shown her photographs, Min Jae with a woman and children that Ji-yeon didn't recognize, and explained that she had been nothing but entertainment. All lies, fabricated photographs, scripted conversations, an elaborate deception designed to ensure she would never try to contact Min Jae again. "I was so ashamed," Ji-yeon said, her voice hollow with old pain. "I felt so stupid for believing there was something real. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought about reaching out anyway, telling you about the baby, demanding support, but I couldn't face it. Couldn't face being laughed at or dismissed or threatened into silence. So you kept her. She was all I had. The only good thing that came from the worst mistake of my life." Ji-yeon's eyes found her daughter. "I lost my teaching job when the pregnancy started showing. People in my town talked. The unmarried teacher, pregnant by a mystery man. I had to move to Seoul, start over, take whatever work I could find." She looked at Min Jae with something between accusation and exhaustion. "I went from a respected teacher to a night shift cleaner in less than a year. All because I believe the lies your friend told me. He's not my friend. Then who is he? Someone who wanted to make sure I never had an heir. Someone who saw you as a threat to his ambitions and eliminated you from my life." Min Jae's voice hardened. "Someone who is going to pay for what he did. To both of us." Ji-yeon studied his face for a long moment. "You really didn't know? About the lies? About Sori? If I had known, do you think I would have let you suffer like this? Do you think I would have let my daughter grow up in poverty while I sat on more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes?" The question hung in the air between them. Ji-yeon didn't answer, but something in her expression shifted, the first crack in the wall of distrust she had built around herself. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now I deal with the man who did this." And then Min Jae looked at his daughter, who had abandoned her toys and was watching their conversation with those unervingly steady eyes. "Then we figure out what comes next. Together. Before I continue, I need you to do something. If you're invested in this story, if you want to see Sung-ho get exactly what he deserves, then subscribe to this channel right now. Not later. Not when the story's over. Right now. Because the confrontation that's coming is going to be one of the most satisfying things you've ever witnessed. This man stole a child from her father. He destroyed an innocent woman's life. He's been planning to betray Min Jae for 15 years. And he's about to find out what happens when you cross the most dangerous man in Seoul. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with someone who needs to see what real justice looks like. The confrontation came 6 days later. Min Jae had planned it carefully, not out of caution, but out of a desire for maximum impact. Sung-ho thought he was untouchable, thought his secrets were buried too deep to ever be found, thought he could continue manipulating Min Jae indefinitely while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The setting was Min Jae's private residence, a penthouse overlooking the Seoul skyline that few people had ever seen. Sung-ho arrived at 8 p.m., summoned for what he believed was a strategic discussion about the Chun syndicate situation. He walked in smiling. He would not walk out the same way. The penthouse's main room had been prepared like a courtroom. Chairs arranged in a semicircle. Documents spread across a central table. And seated in those chairs, silent and watchful, were representatives from 5 of the 7 major families. Men and women whose judgment determined life and death in their world. Sung-Ho's smile faltered the moment he entered. Min-jae, what is this? Sit down, Sung-Ho. Min-jae's voice was ice. We have matters to discuss. The Chin situation can wait. If this is about the council representatives, this isn't about the Chun situation. This is about you. Specifically, about your activities over the past 15 years. Min-jae gestured to the table covered in documents. Your communications with rival organizations. Your financial diversions. Your systematic sabotage of my personal life. The color drained from Sung-Ho's face. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Then let me refresh your memory. Min-jae picked up a folder and began reading. February, 23 months ago. Busan. You arranged for a woman named Yoon Ji-yeon to be visited by operatives posing as my associates. They told her I was married. They showed her fabricated photographs. They ensured she would never try to contact me again. That's absurd. 3 weeks later, you call me using a burner phone registered to a shell company you control. You told me that same woman had died in an accident. You fabricated grief to prevent me from ever searching for her. These are lies. She's alive, Sung-Ho. Min-jae's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. She's been alive all along, working as a cleaner in my own building while I sat upstairs, believing she was dead. And she wasn't alone. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Sorry, 14 months old. His daughter. You stole my child from me. You denied me knowledge of her existence for over a year. You condemned an innocent woman to poverty and shame to protect your own ambitions. Min-jae's control cracked for just a moment, revealing the volcanic fury beneath. And you did all of this while smiling at me, while calling yourself my brother, while pretending to be loyal. Sung-Ho's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies, finding none. The family representatives watched with the cold interest of judges examining evidence. They had seen the documents. They had verified the communications. They understood exactly what Sung-Ho had done. This is a misunderstanding. Sung-Ho tried again, his voice desperate now. These documents are fabricated. Someone is trying to frame me. I've served you faithfully for 15 years. You've served yourself for 15 years. Min-jae stood, his height and presence suddenly dominating the room. Every act of loyalty was calculated to position you as my successor. Every decision you influenced was designed to keep me isolated and childless. You built your entire career on the assumption that I would never discover what you were doing. He leaned close to his former second-in-command. You assumed wrong. The judgment was swift. The family representatives had seen enough. By the ancient laws that governed their world, Sung-Ho's betrayal warranted death. But death would be too easy, too quick, too merciful for a man who had committed crimes of this magnitude. Instead, they chose exile. Complete and absolute exile. His assets would be seized. His connections would be severed. His name would be erased from every record, every alliance, every memory of the underground world. He would leave Seoul with nothing, no money, no protection, no identity, and he would never return. This isn't over, Sung-Ho hissed as guards moved to escort him out. You think you've won? I have information. Insurance. Things that your insurance was recovered from your safe houses 3 days ago. Min-jae interrupted calmly. Your offshore accounts were frozen 2 days ago. Your allies received visits from my representatives yesterday. You have nothing, Sung-Ho. You're nothing. And in an hour, you'll be forgotten. The guards dragged him toward the door. But Min-jae wasn't finished. One more thing. The guard stopped. Min-jae walked slowly toward his former friend, stopping close enough to whisper. My daughter's first word was Appa. She said it 3 days ago when I was visiting her at the safe house. The first word of her life, and it was for me. His voice hardened. You tried to take that from me. You tried to ensure I would never hear it. And for that alone, I would have destroyed you. He stepped back. But I want you to live. I want you to spend whatever time you have left knowing that you failed. That my daughter is thriving. That every moment of happiness I have with her is a moment you tried to prevent and couldn't. He nodded to the guards. Get him out of my sight. The door closed behind Sung-ho. And for the first time in days, Min-jae allowed himself to breathe. Like this video right now. I'm serious. What you just witnessed was 15 years of betrayal unraveling in 15 minutes. A man who thought he was untouchable learning that no one is beyond justice. A father reclaiming the truth that was stolen from him. If that doesn't deserve a like, I don't know what does. Like it, share it, and drop a comment telling me what you think should have happened to Sung-ho. Death? Exile? Something worse? I want to hear your verdict. Part 3. The beginning. The weeks following Sung-ho's exile transformed Min-jae's world in ways he hadn't anticipated. The power vacuum was filled quickly. He had been preparing for this possibility since the moment he discovered the betrayal, positioning loyal lieutenants to take over key operations. The organization continued to function smoothly, perhaps even more smoothly than before, without Sung-ho's constant manipulation. But the real transformation was personal. Min-jae moved Ji-yeon and Sori into his main compound, not as prisoners or trophies, as family. He had architects redesign an entire wing to accommodate them, creating spaces that felt like home rather than fortress. He learned to change diapers. He learned which lullabies Sori preferred. He learned that a 14-month-old schedule was more demanding than any business operation he had ever managed. And he discovered, to his own surprise, that he loved every moment of it. Ji-yeon's transformation was slower, more cautious. She had spent over a year believing Min-jae was a monster. That belief didn't disappear overnight just because she learned the truth. She watched him with his daughter, measuring every interaction, waiting for the mask to slip. It never did, because there was no mask. The man who played peekaboo with his daughter at 6 a.m. was the same man who ordered million-dollar operations at 10 a.m. The tenderness he showed Sori was real. The patience he extended to Ji-yeon was genuine. He was exactly what she had glimpsed in that hotel bar in Busan. A complicated man, yes, a dangerous man, certainly, but not a monster. Just someone who had never been given the chance to be anything else. 6 months after Sung-ho's exile, something shifted between them. It happened gradually. Shared meals that became conversations that became confessions. Ji-yeon told him about her life before Sori, the dream she had abandoned, the person she had been before circumstances forced her to become someone else. Min-jae told her about his own history, the violence that had shaped him, the loneliness that had defined his existence until a small child grabbed his trouser leg and changed everything. They fell in love slowly. Not the burning passion of their first meeting in Busan. Something steadier, deeper, built on shared understanding and mutual respect. By the time Sori spoke her first full sentence, "Appa, come play," they had already decided to make their arrangement permanent. The wedding was small by choice. Just family, which now included the 12 men and women of Min-jae's inner circle, who had proven their loyalty during the Sung-ho crisis. Ji-yeon wore a simple white dress. Sori wore a matching miniature version, having insisted on twinning with her mother. And Kong Min-jae, feared boss of the most powerful criminal organization in Seoul, stood at the altar and wept without shame. "I never knew what I was missing," he said in his vows. "I thought power was enough. I thought control was enough. I thought building an empire would fill whatever emptiness existed inside me." He looked at his daughter, who was trying to eat her flower crown. He looked at his wife, who was crying and laughing at the same time. "I was wrong. Everything I built was preparation for this. For the family I didn't know I wanted. For the love I didn't know I needed. For the second chance I definitely didn't deserve." He took Ji-yeon's hands. I can't promise safety. My world has dangers that won't disappear. But I can promise that everything I am, everything I have, everything I've built, it belongs to you now. Both of you. From this moment until my last breath. Ji-yeon squeezed his hands. I forgive you, she said quietly, for the lies that weren't your lies, for the years we lost to someone else's manipulation, for everything that should have been different but wasn't. She smiled. Now let's start building everything that still can be. 5 years later, Sori started school. The academy Min-jae had chosen had security so elaborate that some heads of state would have envied it. Not because he was paranoid, though he was, but because the threats his family faced were real and ongoing. The underground world never forgot. It never stopped calculating, but it also never stopped respecting the reality of the Kong family's power. No one challenged them. No one dared. On the first morning, Min-jae insisted on walking Sori to the entrance himself. His security team had argued against it. Too exposed, too predictable. But he had overruled them with the authority of a man who had learned that some moments mattered more than safety. Sori was 6 years old now. Still had his eyes. Still had that steady gaze that unsettled people who didn't understand it. But now there was also laughter in those eyes. Joy. The unguarded happiness of a child who had never known danger, never known want, never known the coldness that had defined her father's life before she entered it. What if the other kids don't like me? She asked, gripping his hand. Then they have poor judgment. What if the teachers are mean? Then I'll fire them. Appa, you can't fire my teachers. Watch me. Sori giggled, the sound that had become Min-jae's favorite thing in the world. Seriously, she said, turning to face him with a solemnity that seemed too old for her years. What if everything goes wrong? Min-jae knelt down to her level, his knees protesting the position in a way they hadn't 5 years ago. Then you'll handle it. Because you're my daughter. You're stubborn and kind and brave and terrifyingly clever. He smiled. You walked into a room full of armed criminals when you could barely walk, and you weren't afraid. Nothing in that school is scarier than that. Sori considered this logic. I guess that's true. It's definitely true. She hugged him fiercely. The bone-crushing embrace of a child who hadn't yet learned to hold anything back. I love you, Appa. I love you too, Sori. More than everything I've built. More than everything I am. He kissed her forehead. Now go learn something. And remember, I know. Don't tell anyone what you do for work. That's my girl. She ran toward the school gates, backpack bouncing, hair flying, completely unafraid of the world she was entering. Min-jae watched until she disappeared inside. Then he turned and walked back to his waiting car, where Ji-yeon sat with an expression that mixed pride and terror in equal measure. She's going to be fine, he said, sliding in beside her. I know, but it doesn't make it easier to let go. No, he took her hand. It doesn't. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the school gates close behind their daughter. You know, Ji-yeon said eventually, 6 years ago, I never would have believed any of this. The family, the security, you, walking our daughter to school like a normal father. I'm not a normal father. No, you're better. She squeezed his hand. You chose this. Every day, you choose to be present. That's not normal. That's extraordinary. Min-jae looked at their intertwined fingers. You changed everything, he said quietly. You and Sori. You walked into my life and made me want to be something other than what I was. And are you happy? Being something other. He thought about the question. Thought about the empire he still ran. The threats he still faced. The violence that still existed at the edges of his world. Thought about his daughter's laugh. Thought about his wife's warmth beside him every night. Thought about the second chance he had never expected. Yes, he said, for the first time in my life, I'm actually happy. That evening, after Sori had described every minute of her first day in exhaustive detail, after homework was done and dinner was eaten and bedtime stories were told, Min-jae stood on the balcony of his penthouse and looked out at the city he controlled. Seoul glittered beneath him. Millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of stories being written and rewritten every moment. His empire was vast. His power was secure. His reputation still made grown men tremble. But none of it mattered as much as the two people sleeping inside the home behind him. Jian appeared beside him, wrapping a robe around her shoulders against the night air. "What are you thinking about?" "The night Sori found me." Min-jae shook his head slowly. "I've thought about it 1,000 times. How she got through that door, it should have been impossible. How she walked straight to me, like she knew exactly where she was going. Maybe she did. She was 14 months old. Children know things." Jian leaned against his shoulder. "They feel things we've forgotten how to feel. Maybe she recognized you. Maybe she knew, somehow, that you were missing from her life." Min-jae considered this. "The first time she grabbed my leg, I felt something I couldn't explain, a familiarity I couldn't account for." He paused. "My men thought I was losing my mind. The most powerful crime boss in Seoul, frozen by a baby in a yellow onesie. And now I understand that I wasn't frozen by fear." He turned to look at his wife. "I was frozen by recognition. Some part of me knew, before I could consciously process it, that she was mine, that everything was about to change." Jian reached up and touched his face. "I'm glad she found you. I'm glad she was stubborn enough to get through that impossible door and brave enough to walk into a room full of dangerous men." She smiled. "She gets that from both of us, I think. The stubbornness. Definitely from you. Definitely from you." They laughed quietly, the easy sound of two people who had stopped keeping score long ago. "Thank you," Min-jae said. "For what?" "For giving me something to fight for beyond myself. For Sori. For this." He gestured at the penthouse around them. "This used to be a fortress. Now it's a home. I didn't know there was a difference until you showed me." Ji-yeon kissed him gently. "You showed me too, that people can change, that the story we tell ourselves doesn't have to be the only story, that even a man with blood on his hands can hold a child with gentleness." She took his hand and led him inside. Behind them, the city continued its eternal rhythm. Crimes committed, fortunes made, empires rising and falling in the endless dance of power. But Kang Min-jae was done dancing alone. He had a family now. He had a future. He had everything he never knew he needed, delivered by a child who refused to be afraid. And that was worth more than all the power in the world. The Yendi, if this story touched something inside you, I need you to do 4 things right now. First, like this video. Not because I'm asking, but because this story deserves to be seen by more people. Stories about second chances. Stories about finding family in unexpected places. Stories about the power of a child to change everything. Second, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. I tell stories like this one. Stories about people facing impossible odds and finding redemption anyway. If this moved you, there's more waiting. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who thinks it's too late for them. Someone who's given up on finding connection or love or family. Show them that second chances are real. Fourth, drop a comment. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. Was it the first time Sori grabbed Min-jae's leg? The discovery of Sung-ho's betrayal? The moment she called him Appa for the first time? I read every comment, and I want to know what part of this story stayed with you. Because here's the truth. We all have doors in our lives that seem impossible to open. Walls we've built to protect ourselves. Fortresses that keep everyone out. And sometimes what we need most is a child on unsteady legs, or something equally unexpected, to walk through those barriers and remind us what we've been missing. Min-jae built an empire, but Sori gave him a family, and that made all the difference. Thank you for watching. Thank you for engaging. And remember, some consequences don't arrive with guns or knives. Some walk in on unsteady legs and change everything without saying a word.